Good morning, everyone. I am delighted to welcome you to this live stream session from Davos. We are very delighted to have you here at the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum. A special shout out to our global shapers that are dialing in from around the world. Welcome to you. My name is Olajumoke Adekeye. I am a member of the Global Shapers Foundation Board, and I'm joined by 4 phenomenal global shapers who I'll have the privilege of introducing shortly. This year's annual meeting is convening on the theme, Collaboration for the Intelligent Age. And our session, aptly themed Generation Uncertain, introduces the reality of a poly-crisis world for young people in which conflict, climate degradation, and unemployment are the order of the day. Yet, we recognize tremendous opportunity to craft the world of tomorrow with the resources that we have today. And speaking of resources, people. Human resources are the greatest assets we have in order to be able to drive transformational progress. Now, half of the population of the world is under the age of 30. They have grown up in a world characterized by rapid social, economic, and technological changes. But also, unfortunately, with dwindling hopes of steady employment and social mobility compared to their parents, their grandparents. And despite really, if you think about it, ever-increasing rates of higher education attainment, more contributions to social benefit systems that they may never really benefit from. Now, the confluence of geopolitics and thankfully now tapering global inflation have led to a cost of living crisis in so many parts of the world, where high house prices have really drastically outstripped wage growth and sometimes really eroding the possibility for so many young people of building intergenerational wealth, securing a higher quality of life. Now we are at an inflection point where the possibility of future crises loom large, but the center cannot hold. Today, we're going to be looking at what collaborative effort is needed to restore optimism in the future for young people globally amid the present situation that is characterized by crises, conflict, and climate change. So here with me to tackle this conversation is Davy on my left from Boston. We also have Gyri from the Munich hub. We have Shehrbano from the Islamabad hub, and Tony from the Caracas hub. Let me start with Gyri. So Gyri, I'll start with you. You are a co-founder and CPO of Tanso Technologies, a decarbonization platform for industrial manufacturers based in Munich, Germany. You are a climate activist who in 2021 was listed as one of the top women in artificial intelligence in Germany for your AI and climate research. In 2023, you also won the Ethics in Electronics Award by the electronics industry for your work on decarbonizing the industrial sector. Quite impressive, but we'd like to know you a bit better. Could you tell us, how has your personal background actually shaped the work that you do in climate and AI and the issues that you're actively working on?
Yeah, I am originally Norwegian, even though I live in Germany. And I grew up on a farm quite remote on the coast of Norway, seeing how nature is so present and that we depend on nature. And when I was going to study, I wanted to study electrical engineering, seeing that the energy adventure and the energy transformation that Norway has had in the last 50 years, finding oil, being part of the climate problem. And for me, that was super exciting to be part of. Wanted to become an engineer, became an electrical engineer, and then later realizing that the power of technology can actually also solve these problems, but also generate more and more opportunities. And being Norwegian, I of course feel the responsibility for also being part of emitting those emissions that now has effect all over the globe, and seeing that we as young humans also have a role to play both in the solutions, but also facing the consequences and experiencing that on our own bodies.
Thank you. Let me come over to Tony. Tony, you're a Venezuelan journalist and editor at Caracas Chronicles. You teach journalism at Montevideo University. You've contributed to leading media outlets, including Bloomberg, Politico, and The Economist. And you recently launched the Venezuela Weekly podcast. You were known as a prominent youth voice on crises of democracy, corruption, migration, and technology in your country, Venezuela. Could you share about what has shaped you? How has your upbringing shaped you in the work that you do and the advocacy that you do today?
Sure, thank you very much. So I grew up in a Venezuela that's very different from the one of my parents. My parents grew up in a country that was considered the exemplary democracy of Latin America. It was one of the richest nations, not only of the region, but of the world. Well, I grew up in a country that in the last decade has seen a contraction of its GDP of 75%. We're talking about 3 times the Great Depression. And that has led to over 25% of our population leaving and generating the biggest migration crisis in the Americas. Venezuelans are facing a humanitarian crisis caused after decades of institutional collapse and democratic backsliding, and it has brought a massive crisis to a country with the biggest oil reserves in the world. So growing up in Venezuela is growing up in a hotspot of political conflict, of economic collapse, and definitely of very challenging problems, both on the humanitarian side, but also on the institutional, the political, the economic, and of course the environmental side. We're talking about the 7th most biodiverse country in the world. So while Venezuelans are facing all these political and economic problems, we're also seeing an average of 7 oil spills per month. We're seeing the destruction of our Amazonian rainforest, which we have 7% of it. So this exemplary, promising country of my parents is gone, and I'm growing up in something that is very different, that has really pushed me into getting into these areas and strive to get a better country for me and for future Venezuelans too.
Thank you for sharing your drive with us. Let me come to you, Shehrbano. In Islamabad, you are a public sector consultant designing a climate governance program to support local governments in Pakistan to respond more effectively to climate emergencies. You're also the curator of the Islamabad Hub, and you lead the volunteer initiative Career Counseling for All. With support of the Ministry of Education, you're providing guidance and counseling to students in Islamabad. What's the driving force for you here?
You know, Jumi, I am a firm believer that our stories and experiences inform a huge part of who we are. And I am someone who has always led with my heart. So I think what's reflective for me is that in 2022, 33 million Pakistanis were found under the floods. 1/6 of Pakistan was submerged in the floods. And that is when I lost my ancestral home of 70 years. So what I mean to say is that climate is inherently a reality now. And that really impacted the way I perceive the future. But the most glaring for me during the flood in Pakistan was women and children. How do we ensure that women and children are not left behind? Especially in my village, where 30% is our literacy rates, and it falls to a glaring 18% for women. But also in a district where we had 50% malnourished and stunted children. So how do we think about them? And I feel the best way for me was, okay, I need to ensure that communities are in the conversations that we have when we are designing interventions, which has led and informed the work that I now do in designing appropriate interventions that put communities at the core of what we do.
That's excellent. Thank you, because it's really important for us to showcase that the work that our global shapers, and some of whom are on this panel, are doing is actually driven from their realities, their lived realities. I'd like to come to Davy. You were a joint doctoral candidate in the Harvard-MIT Health Sciences and Technology program. Your research focuses on collecting high-resolution neural activity data and computationally simulating the nervous system of small animals. Your mission in life is to prepare humanity for whole brain emulation in the future in a scientifically and ethically rigorous way. Now, your research has resulted in more than 17 publications and over 500 citations. What's your driving force here?
Yeah, thank you so much for that very kind introduction. So I grew up near the Gobi Desert, and we lived in kind of a semi-nomadic lifestyle, and I had a lot of health challenges, both mentally and physically as a kid. So I was actually really interested in going into medicine, especially neurology, to try to understand what are some of the things that happened to me as a kid. But after coming to the US, I realized that we really don't know much about the brain to really go into neurology, to become a neurologist to make so much of an impact. Because a lot of diseases such as Alzheimer's disease, glioblastomas, we have had research, decades of research, and without resulting any meaningful progress in clinical medicine. So I realized that, and in fact, that this kind of struggle in trying to translating the research into medicine has resulted a decrease in investments in these fields because investors are feeling discouraged from the current understanding of the brain. So that's when I switched from medicine into neuroscience basic research, and I wanted to shoot for the star, and I basically got into whole brain emulation from a fundamentally understanding how our brain processes global information.
Yeah, thank you. The reality the reality of the world that we live in, the staggering statistics really demonstrate that there is no other way, there's no other step that we must take other than action. And I'm really privileged to have you on this panel to be able to talk about, maybe dig a little bit into some of the issues and the root causes of some of the issues that you're working on. Here's an interesting statistic. 38% of youth surveyed by UNICEF believe that they will be economically worse off than their parents. I mean, we've seen the example that Tony was sharing from Venezuela. But in high-income countries, this number doubles, with 59 believing they will be worse off than their parents. So now, having shared with us some of the work that you're doing, what's your driving force, what are some of the uncertainties that you're seeing in your work or in your communities that other young people are facing and are grappling with? It would be great to hear your perspectives on that. Tony, would you like to go next?
Sure. I wouldn't say optimism is dead in Venezuela, but it's damaged. And that's really affecting all Venezuelans, especially young people. When you see the population pyramid of Venezuela, it looks like a war-torn country. You have a lot of old people, a lot of children, and the middle is empty. People are leaving. Nobody wants to leave. No Venezuela wanted to leave Venezuela, but they have been forced to because of the lack of situations, because of opportunities, because of the human rights situation, and because of the economic collapse. So a recent study by a think tank in Caracas found out that since the 1990s, intergenerational educational mobility has fallen by 41% in Venezuela. So younger Venezuelans are less educated than their parents, and it's part of a wider collapse. So you see it in the fact that our monthly salary, our average, our minimum wage a month is $3. So it's a country that is getting extremely poor. By now, Venezuela has the second highest food insecurity rate in the Americas after Haiti. So you're seeing all these different types of problems overlapping and feeding each other in a very toxic loop, which is clearly affecting the integrity of the population and the opportunities of people. So I would say that when all of these overlaps, it brings a very pessimistic scenario for most young Venezuelans and feeds a migration crisis and forces us to think about going to other countries and to seek opportunities elsewhere because the country is becoming a ceiling for us. There's a moment in which we cannot grow anymore and in which we realize that at least in the current situation, in the current economy, in the current institutional framework, achieving the lives and the opportunities our parents found in a formerly promising nation that once showed for 40 years the highest growth rate in the world is gone. So once that becomes a ceiling, you have to go elsewhere or submit yourself to a situation that is not the best. So that's why I say that our optimism is damaged, but at least it's not gone. And I do think that many Venezuelans and many young Venezuelans are not only staying, but are fighting and struggling for a best country, and they're also doing it from abroad. So I wouldn't say everything's lost, but it's definitely challenging for us.
Yes, you sound like you're at the cusp of making a case for intergenerational equity. Let me come to you, Gyri. You live in Germany. What are some of the challenges that young people are facing and voicing out really vehemently?
I think we need to acknowledge that Europeans have a different life situation than many others in the rest of the world. Still, there is also challenges and more pessimism in Europe and amongst European youth. We see that our politics are lacking in leadership. We have heard here at Davos in many European-centric sessions that we need one Europe, we need to stand on our own feet, we need to build that type of leadership. But currently, a lot of countries, including Germany, is struggling to even put a government on its feet. And that comes on top of every crisis, like a global crisis. And one thing I want to highlight is that amongst the D50, so the 50 global shapers from 40 different countries this year as a delegation to Davos and to the World Economic Forum, Shehrbano being one of them, 3 of these global shapers have lost their family homes in the last years on 3 different continents. So for us, climate change is an actual problem. In Germany, we had flooding. In Valencia, we had many people dying due to flooding. And what we see is that the uncertainties that comes with climate are not yet, there are no uncertainties anymore, they're rather certain. Climate change is the most researched market trend in history. We know what's happening, we know what's going on, but the consequences of climate, we don't know. And especially when it comes to migration, we talk about, where youth find opportunities, they will go, but also where they can't see any opportunities, they won't stay. And it's estimated that until I retire in 2070, there will be 1.2 billion climate refugees. Think about that for a second. 1.2 billion climate refugees. And that we had in 2015, 20 million coming to Europe, putting the entire continent into a right extremist political instability situation. Is that really the future that we believe that we were gonna have? We have an already polarized world. We see that the global political powers in the world are already struggling to collaborate. There's no collaboration happening at the moment, or there's no outlook for it. And with the uncertainty coming with the climate crisis, the direct consequences of it, but also the indirect of migration and political instability, and therefore also economic instability, no wonder that the youth is pessimistic about the future.
Can I press you a little bit more? You mentioned that at least for what I thought I heard, that the climate migration then caused the polarization in Europe. Can you clarify that?
I'm not a political scientist. I'm an AI engineer. So I'm not gonna pretend that I understand fully the causes and the causalities of what happened. What we do see is that there is a lot of opinions against migration. I'm an immigrant. So when Germans, right-wing German says the immigrants come to Germany to steal our jobs, I say I created 40. And still, thank you. And my aim is to create even more and be part of this. Immigrants are often an unproportional large amount of founders are immigrants. And innovation often comes from diversity and collaboration across different perspectives. And therefore, I choose to be optimistic. I'm a technology optimist. I choose to be optimistic, even though as a researcher, former researcher, the science is very clear, and the uncertainty bars are so out of bounds that we don't even know, we cannot even computationally figure out what happens after tipping points, even with the AI that we have today.
Natural progression to you, Davy, right? She's been speaking about computation and innovation. So just share your perspective on some of the uncertainties you're seeing that young people are experiencing, or even in your field specifically, that you think really should get that spotlight.
Yeah, I think actually I would slightly disagree on that. We know like there is an uncertainty in climate change. I think there is still a lot of uncertainty in this generation. And then I'm gonna take it from a very technical and scientific perspective since I am a scientist. I think that we are unsure where the AI is going next. And AI is impacting every part of our life, from climate, from job security, just every fiber of our society. And because we have such a poor understanding of how AI actually works, this is introducing a lot of uncertainty here. And I think that because the young scientists are often not in the room, in the conversation, on the decision making table, we're really but at the same time, we are the one who's pushing the technology forward. I think this creates a really interesting dilemma, where the technology is going, but also what the society actually wants. And I think that actually is maybe part of the reason why that you pointed out that in high-income countries there's more pessimism, because those are the people who are feeling the technology, the impact of the technology first, and then they feel like they have no control, no say in where the technology will go. So yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. No technological progress without the youth and young people. Let me come to you in Islamabad. So we've heard, across the panel, some of the uncertainties, issues you've spoken so eloquently and just heartfelt about the experiences you've had personally. Can you share with us, are there other concerns that young people in your part of the world are experiencing that really should get mentioned and are important to bring to this platform?
Jumi, I really believe that perspective is important. The challenges that the global north face are widely different than what the global south face. And the global south is majority of the world. So while we can talk about AI and technology, and it's important, I understand, but I think when we look at the intelligent age, we're also talking about human capital. And who are the human capital? And who are these youth? But I want to actually take a step back. I think when we talk about human potential, we look at children as well. In Pakistan, 43% of the children are stunted and malnourished. What does that mean, and what does that mean for the future? It means that 43%, which is almost 60 to 70 million of Pakistani children today, are not going to fully develop emotionally and physically. And they will not be able to effectively contribute to the society in the future. And this is concerning. This is highly concerning. And then we move to the next phase. Currently in Pakistan, unfortunately, 12 million girls are out of school. And that means that they will never fully be able to contribute economically to the development of Pakistan. And I firmly believe that the challenge is today that unless and until we do not invest in our children, in our women, in our girls, and understand the challenges of the global south and ensure they're not getting left behind while we move towards a digitized world and go towards advancements, we will firmly not move forward collaboratively as a world. So in Pakistan, our human capital is the biggest challenge. But secondly, that I want to reflect on is also upward mobility. In the global south and in Pakistan specifically, many of our challenges are further compounded by challenges like climate. It is not, we are living it right now. And it is a vicious circle that today I am rebuilding my house, but tomorrow I may not have it. But more than that, what about all these children who are perpetually getting left behind? And these inequities are deepening. And this is where we feel so pessimistic about the world. And I think this is something that we really need to have to think about, because as a youth leader, I want to live in this world and I just don't want to exist, which makes me a little bit pessimistic.
There is pessimism among young people that is understood. Our Global Shapers Impact Report, which was published just earlier this week, is actually showing that global shapers, in spite of the staggering statistics on whether it's maternal health, youth health, and the economics that have been described, climate disasters, just the depressing forecasts we're seeing, though, that global shapers are optimistic. 83% see the world as full of opportunities, and 75% are feeling empowered to act on some of these social challenges that you've been kind enough to describe. So why should we remain optimistic? Why are shapers optimistic despite how difficult the world that we live in is, the poly-crisis context in which young people are growing up in? Why should we remain optimistic? Davy?
Yeah, so I think that's a very interesting phenomenon and actually leads to my call for action. So I think the reason why we feel more optimistic than the general population is because we have more agencies. We have a space, we have a place at the table where we feel like we can make changes, where we can guide the future of society into a direction that we think is positive. And I think that is critical in generating hope and generating motivations and courage for the future. And I think this is why I think we need to involve more young scientists, from my personal perspective, young scientists into the boardroom, into space like this to talk about what does science and technology mean if they cannot lift all boats. And I'm quoting one of the session's name from Davos today.
Really appreciate that perspective. I'm hearing you say empower youth. I'm hearing you support their inclusion, in decision-making in sciences, support their leadership. Why should we be optimistic? I mean, Tony, you said that hope isn't lost, but it's damaged. So why should we try to repair it? I mean, what are the hopes? Why should we be hopeful?
I'm a believer in humanity, and I know it sounds cheesy, but I feel that as a species, we have proven over and over our ability to rise over world wars, over environmental crises, over disease and pandemics, and continue striving for a civilization that, despite undergoing, as you mentioned, a poly-crisis, a moment of conflict, a moment of challenges, of economic problems, and of course environmental destruction, we're actually, in most of the world, better off than a few decades ago. We are a world that has managed to achieve more wealth, that has managed to achieve more democracy in most countries. And that really keeps me hopeful, despite the challenges that countries like Venezuela, like Palestine, like Sudan show today. In the 1960s, it was expected that humanity was going to face, through the 70s and 80s, a demographic collapse because there wouldn't be enough food for everybody. And yet humanity managed to achieve the Green Revolution and increase the yields of the agriculture we were producing and feed humanity and avoid the malnutrition trap everybody was expecting. I think we're going to do the same with climate change. I feel we're going to find a solution, and we're going to keep growing as a species that has already reached the moon, and I'm pretty sure will reach other places. Even in Venezuela, where things are actually worse than before, contrary to what's happening in many countries in the world, I have optimism that keeps driving me and the people around me. And I feel that's why, despite 25 years of backsliding, of crisis, we're still fighting for a better place. I see it in everyday heroes, not only young people, but also people from other generations. And with everyday heroes, I mean college professors, I mean my friends who are working in such a complex environment, who are doing social innovation, who are working with the environment, who are in NGOs. And yes, Venezuela has gold, it has oil, it has diamonds, but I feel that its wealth is its people in itself. Recently, I met a European diplomat in Caracas, and she had come before in the year 2000, and then she came back in 2023. And I told her, what shocked you the most? Thinking she was going to tell me that, it was how the economy got so bad, how everything is run down. And she said, I'm shocked by the amount of well-formed, brilliant people that still lives in Venezuela and continue struggling for a better country despite everything that has happened. And I have my hope in that wealth, in our people and the people of the world and humanity.
The power of youth, young people. Some people may describe youthful idealism as continuing to fuel a lot of energy expenditure. Do we agree that is it just about youthful idealism? Is it just about hope? what is driving the action we're seeing on the ground? I mean, the Global Shapers community, since inception, has had more than 3,000 social impact projects in more than 500 cities across the world, impacting the lives of more than 20 million people. Is it just youthful idealism? I think Davy was talking about having agency. Do you have any other thoughts on what else is driving young people to create change at their own level?
I believe it's compassion. I think in a lot of the barriers that we have and the challenges that we had, and in the multifaceted world that we live in, there's also opportunity. And for me personally, that opportunity is the 30,000 global shapers, alumni, and active shapers around the world, which have impacted the life of 2.5 million people. And if that's not a success case, and if that is not hope for the future, then I don't know what is.
It's great. So how can we bridge the generational divides? I mean, we've talked about the work that global shapers have the opportunity to have made across the globe, the impact we've been able to achieve. We've talked about the issues, but this week is about collaboration for an intelligent age. So what sort of collaborations are needed to scale excellent ideas, excellent projects that we're seeing that are making impact? What kinds of collaborations, what kind of collaborative efforts are required to actually move the world in the trajectory, from this current trajectory to a better one that we want to see for young people today and tomorrow?
I personally believe it's a multi-stakeholder approach. And you know, we've talked a lot about it. I believe that everyone impacted and should be at the table, whether that's the youth, the private sector, philanthropies, governments. This is where I think I want to reflect our Innovation Prize. This year, I'm thrilled to share that Islamabad Hub was one of the Innovation Prize winners. And with the support of the Global Alliance for Youth, Accenture, and the Global Shapers community, we had a humble grant that we were able to scale up our project, Career Counseling for All in Islamabad, which is we provide tailored guidance and counselor sessions to young youth members to thrive in the evolving job market, whether that's AI, entrepreneurship, but also personal development. And last night, I think if you were at the Gaia Gala last night, we heard that only 1% of money is funded into youth innovations and grants are given to the youth, which I think is deeply concerning. Because I feel that the philanthropies and leaders of the world and businesses need to invest significantly in youth-led solutions. We are the eyes on the ground. We are the ones that are aware of the evolving ground realities. And we are the ones that are driving purposeful change. And I think the world, whether that's the business, the government leaders, they need to invest in us. Through a top-down approach, yes, but also through a bottom-up perspective, and that's where I think the Global Shapers community really does come in. But with that said, the second edition of our Innovation Prize is also coming on the February 1st, and I encourage every single Global Shaper and hubs around the world to please apply and amplify your impact.
Wonderful, thank you for making that pitch. So we've heard invest in youth-led solutions. We've heard have young people on boards, whether it's in the scientific fields, maybe in companies, even in public sector. What other efforts are really needed to ensure that we can move again the needle in the right direction and we can really create a world that is conducive for young people and future generations?
We need to include young people in the places where the decisions are being taken. As you said, people in their 30s like us represent half of the world's population. We are not just a minority, we're half of humanity. And we're actually the people who are gonna live the consequences of climate change in its worst, or of AI if it continues growing the way it is, or all of the changes that are happening in the world so fast right now. We're living in a world that we grew up hearing was gonna be more united, more globalized, more free, and in a world that's fragmenting and falling apart into challenging rival blocks that are actually cutting off the opportunities to collaborate as a humanity. And I don't think that's the world we want to live in. We don't want to go back to the world of the 1930s where you had different blocks of different superpowers striving to divide the world in spheres of influence. We want a world where everybody has a stake in the table. And it's young people. It's people from the global south, like Shehrbano and me. It's people from the global north, like Gyri and Deng, that deserve a place to talk and collaborate and spread the exchange of ideas, but also to put our voice out there. Because it's the opportunity for us to actually influence and add our ideas and expectations of the stuff that is going to define the next years of our lives and of our future children too. So we need more young people in politics. We need more young people in government. We need more young people in companies' boards. We need more young people in spaces like the Davos Forum and all the forums and the COPs and the summits all over the world. We're tired of being treated like little children, of being told what to do and what not to do, because we actually deserve a place at the table and our voices must be heard. Because as I said, we're not just a minority, we're half of humanity.
Yes, on that note, speaking about vitality, passion, energy, experience, perspectives, diversity that the youth voice brings, would love to take some questions from the audience. Please raise your hand. If you're picked on, we'll ask that you rise, that you stand up so that you are seen. I'd ask that if you're asking a question that you please introduce yourself, your name, your hub if you're a global shaper, and to ask your question. All right, to my left.
My name is Davy from Global Shapers Ahmedabad. We spoke about that the young voices should be heard. And as current global shapers, we are trying our best, what we can, to make the right change or impact. Do you think the coming generation, because we're soon going to become an alumni, do you think the coming generation carries the same interest, carries the same spark, which we are currently are having to create a better impact? Do you think that they'll be able to take over the legacy, or there'll be some changes in the mindset? Because we can see the trends we have having the conversation about Gen Zs or the coming generations. So do you think there will be a deflect, or it'll be they'll be carry forwarding the legacy?
You want me to answer it, or?
If you want to, go ahead.
Sure. I think that a fundamental part of being a global shaper is being optimistic, is believing in the legacy. We're driven by the belief that we can change things, that we can shape things. So yeah, I do believe I'm going to be an alumni in 2 years, but I have no doubt that the people who are younger than me, who are coming, have the same drive. As I said, I'm a believer in humanity, and that also signifies believing in the people coming behind me. I'm pretty sure that just as we are doing our effort to shape and improve the world, the younger people than us also have that belief and are moved by the same drive and optimism that we have. And I'm pretty sure that my colleagues here also agree with that. So yeah, I'm not pessimistic at all with the youth, and I'm pretty sure that they'll bring amazing things to the world too.
Okay. Over there, please.
Hello, my name is Chiro. I'm from South Africa, the Johannesburg hub. So my question is, so with the rise of cancel culture and, essentially corporations have realized that in order to be more politically correct and to toe the line with young people, they need to be more inclusive. But often in wanting to be more inclusive and include racial minorities, young people who are part of the LGBTQ community, women, it's more of a token rather than including young people to make a substantial contribution. It's more just being at the table rather than actually involving us at the table to have a voice. And so how do we overcome that?
I can jump in on this one. I often get invited because I'm a woman. I'm a woman in tech. I'm a female founder. It's a perfect squeezed in. I'm not from the global south, unfortunately, but I am an immigrant. And what I have experienced is that those opportunities that come to you by that is also an opportunity to really prove yourself. It shouldn't be like that, right? We should be taken for our achievements. All global shapers have massive achievements before they're 30. The new 30 under 30 should be global shapers only. No, but I'm serious. I think it's an opportunity to take that space and really have courage to own up to that space. And I'm surprised, and I think all of the global shapers that have been here at Davos this week have noticed that switch in the leaders that we'll talk to when they first like, hey, who are you? What are you? Oh, okay. What a kid. And then you start asking the questions in the sessions. Global shapers this week have asked the most critical questions to the leaders. We have dared to be vulnerable. I think it's collaboration also in the emotional intelligence age. We have dared to ask critical but also inclusive questions. What about the Global South? What about LGBTQ? We are there to take that space. And I believe that just like, we know that we're good. You know, we know that we have not only voices, but we also have great ideas and innovations to bring up. So I would just encourage everyone who get that talk in to use it, but also to speak up when they say, hey, did you actually listen to what I said?
Isn't there perhaps also an opportunity for continued advocacy to ensure that you're not just at the table, but making decisions? And I think that young people should not let up in ensuring that they're not just brought to the table, but can actually make contributions and demonstrate that concretely by sharing thought leadership as well, and ensuring that whether you're a global shaper or not, that we're a voice for young people. I think we have time for just, okay, here and over here, please.
Wow, what an amazing session. This is my 10th Davos, and this, out of all the sessions that I've sat through this week, this has been extraordinary. So I have more of a comment. My name is Kimberly Washington. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Deep Space Biology, and also the founder of Space for Girls. And, space is a new industry. It's an industrial revolution that's happening, soon to be over $1.2 trillion. And young people are being left behind. And not only, young people, I started working in the space sector, looked around, and I didn't see many women either. I am so enthusiastic and excited to feel the energy in this room. And as a builder in the space sector, if any of you have an interest in participating internationally, this is a global industrial revolution that's happening. Please speak with me. I want to support you, open up doors. And we need, space is for all of us. And space must be for Earth and for the benefit of humanity. And we need this type of energy and enthusiasm in the space sector. So thank you. Thank you for inspiring me this week.
Thank you. My name is Arno Ratzinger. I'm from the Geneva Hub, also fellow Global Shaper. And I was super inspired by your remarks and really the impressive impact that you've had. One question that I always ask myself, we are so fortunate to, get that seat at the table, get that invitation. Even sometimes the, incentive behind it might not be the most noble. But what is something that you do in your hub or in your organizations that you're leading and shaping to also uplift those who are less privileged, who maybe don't have a university background, that, maybe don't have a stable family or other challenges that they're grappling with? Thank you.
I can go with that one. So a project that we particularly cherish in our hub in Caracas is called Shapers for Venezuela. So Shapers for Venezuela has been around for a series of years, and it's in collaboration with other hubs in the region to actually provide help and aid to Venezuelan migrants and refugees through Latin America. But at the same time, a particularly beautiful side of it inside Venezuela is that the Shapers who are within Shapers for Venezuela work with families whose children or whose parents left for other countries on what we call duelo migratorio. That's migration grief. The grief of losing your family, the grief of losing your parents because they went to Peru or to Colombia to send you remittance. So it's really beautiful to see the Shapers work with vulnerable communities, low-income communities in the hillsides of Caracas, and deal with the children and the communities there on the grief that it represents losing your family and losing your community to an ever-increasing migration crisis. So that's a project from my hub that I particularly cherish, and the impact it's doing in Caracas, in Venezuela, and in Latin America.
Yeah. Thank you all so much for your contributions. I'm afraid that's all the time we have, but really excited of the prospects that we have for young people to continue to make impact. I think part of the calls to action I've heard here today is to make sure that we empower young people who are already taking up leadership positions, who are already making impact in their communities. The intent is to ensure that they are included in decision making, that they are funded, their initiatives that are funded and scaled. So thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you.